I'm with the man himself. Euan Smith joined as Group Chief Operating Officer and Chief Executive Officer. He has been instrumental in building the new Astro, including the aggregation of multiple streaming services. Maybe a challenge, right? I think in your years of working that significantly shaped your leadership style.
Here's the rule. Once is unlucky, twice would be incompetent. If you're making great content, sports or local content, or you're bringing great content, the best of the content from overseas, people watch you wherever you are.
Hello, this is Frida Liu, and you're watching Live Confessions Season 3. I'm with the man himself. Euan Smith joined as Group Chief Operating Officer and Chief Executive Officer TV in 2020, and in 2023 assumed the role of Group Chief Executive Officer. He has been instrumental in building the new Astro, including the aggregation of multiple streaming services, development of the hybrid connected Ultra 4K for UHD and Ulti HD boxes, entry into the internet service provider market with Astro Fibre, the launch of the challenger OTT platform Syok, and delivery of Malaysia's only holistic addressable advertising service. A little bit about him. He's an established media executive with a unique skill set spanning both business and technology, media operations, and in transformation. In his early career, Euan held roles in Unilever and KPMG before moving into senior leadership positions with Sky UK, Sky Germany, and Fox in the US, and also in Australia. Moving from KPMG and then a little bit more towards media. And I do want to know a little bit about the man himself. I won't go into what was like growing up, but I do want to come in halfway before you start with your first job. You were in Greece. So this is 20 plus years ago, I guess. What were you thinking going into Greenland?
So thank you for having me on this thing. This is amazing. So I'd done 2 years in a real 40 hours a week sweatbox mechanical engineering course at Birmingham. And my mentor said, there's this thing going on in Denmark where they do a transfer of students between here and Denmark. So at that point in time, I met a girl. There's always a girl, right? So I met a girl. Her name was Maria. We're still talking.
Thanks for clarifying that.
And when I finished my year, I came back for a year.
Right.
But she wanted to follow me and do psychology, and she got a place in Lancaster. But for Danes at the time, they had to pay themselves. I mean, it's like that for everybody now, but I was lucky the government paid for my degree. So the best way for a Dane to get money to go to university is to go and work in Greenland, because Greenland's under home rule for Denmark. Right. And they waive your tax. And base rate of tax in Denmark, no clue what it is now, but at the time it was 40%. Right. So effectively she could go up there and she could work 1 year and get 2 years' pay, broadly. Right. Yeah. So she had headed up there to do exactly that. So I went up there and then went all the way up the west coast and eventually met her, and then worked for the worst job I've ever had. The worst job I've ever had.
What did you do?
I was unloading prawn trawlers at 67.3 degrees north.
But so Greenland, and after that, you went to Unilever. And just before this, you said you've never applied for a job ever.
I've never applied for a job.
How did Unilever come about?
So there were these Christmas courses that were offered. I think they still exist. So again, university, Christmas courses, and you just sign up for one of these courses. And I signed up for two. One was with Mars, and one was with Unilever, and they take you to what was their training, like a Jacobean, beautiful Tudor mansion, both of them, and they teaching you kind of like leadership skills, and the idea was to prepare you for your first job. Unbeknownst to me, because I'm naive as heck, they actually were talent spotting. So after the course, both courses, I was surprised to find I got called by the HR team. And then I get a phone call saying, can you come in? We want to introduce you to some people. And I had the Mars job first week of January. Right. And the Unilever job, because they want to do this thing called the milk, they call it a milk round sort of thing. It's basically, you all sit and discuss for a day in a group of 8 of you, and they have all of the various great and good from the operating companies come and circle you, and then there's a psychologist and blah, blah, blah. They couldn't get that scheduled until, I remember it was on my birthday, 22nd of April.
Right.
So I had to hold Mars off until the 22nd of April for Unilever, and then Unilever said, we'd like to give you a job at the end of that. And I went from there, and I've never applied for a job since.
So this is all the corporate gigs. I mean, corporate gigs, as in from Unilever to KPMG, right? What led to that career in media?
So I was making ice cream. I was in Unilever making ice cream, which I've got to say is the second best thing to do in the world.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm making Magnum and Cornetto and all this stuff. And I had this amazing boss, Wim Hoogstad. And he left the food division of Unilever and went to personal care. And I got a new boss. I won't tell his name. It's terrible.
Okay.
Terrible. I mean, the first meeting with me, I've been like flying all the way up the Unilever ranks, yeah, doing lots of different interesting jobs. And the first meeting with me, he said, well, you haven't ever been graded. And I said, no, because I'm never in a job long enough to get properly graded. He said, well, I'm going to sort that out. You will do the same job that you're doing now for at least 3 years.
Okay.
And I'm like, no, that's not who I am. So then I'm chatting to a friend, Martin. Yeah, and Martin says, I've just joined KPMG. Why don't you have a coffee? So we came in and had a coffee. And the guy walks in the room. And the guy turns out to be the partner. He's just left Anderson's. He's trying to build a supply chain practice in KPMG. We went for dinner. At midnight, as I'm climbing into the cab in London, he shakes my hand and says, I'll send you the paperwork in the morning. Oh. Yeah. So that's how I got to KPMG. And then I went from KPMG into a white goods company called Hepworth. And I went there because the CEO, who was the best French guy I've ever, just an incredibly great guy.
Okay.
I did a project for him, and at the end of the project, he said, Euan, I have tried to find somebody else who can run this procurement thing for me. I cannot find anyone I like. You will have to do it. And that was how I got there.
All right.
But then we've been doing it for 2 years, and I'm living in Paris now.
You enjoy procurement?
I did.
Okay.
I did. It's a long distant past memory.
Okay.
So we're in Paris. We've rationalised some companies. We've done a bunch of M&A. It's been super exciting. And Jean-Francois, who got lung cancer, left very, very quickly. And the family of the business, it's family-run business, decided to move headquarters back to Germany, where they were from. So I had a wife and a 1-year-old in Paris, and suddenly I'm commuting to Dusseldorf all the time. And I was miserable doing that for maybe 3 months, thinking, what shall I do? And the phone rang. And it's a guy, my partner in KPMG, who I'd still stayed in contact with, who said, Euan, what are you doing? And I said, being miserable in Dusseldorf. And he said, good, because I've just joined Sky, and I've got to tell you, it's like the bleep, 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 Wild West here. Come and join me.
Wow.
And that's how I went to Sky.
Wow.
And that was 23 years ago now.
Okay, just something you said, like good bosses and terrible bosses, right? What have you learned, like, I guess, leading people as well? And
I've never left a company. I've always left a bad boss or been drawn towards a great boss.
Right.
And I think you'll see it, it's all over LinkedIn, all those places. They say it all the time, but I think it's so true. I think that the quality of the boss that you have, it almost doesn't matter what the role or what the...
Right.
If you've got a great boss who actually is looking out for you, and it's a two-way street on your development,
right.
Yeah, then you just... and I've always just, when I've had a great boss, after a while you put your hand up and go, bored now, think this is good, think I can do something else, and that boss will always make it happen for me. And
right.
So I guess that's what we try and do here in Astro, I think, is that
right.
we try as a leadership team to get our team to a stage where they can step up. I think if sometimes you have to go external and hire for certain reasons. You need a certain skill set, blah, blah, blah. But if you can just promote people and move people up through the structure and give them a career,
right.
I think that's one of the key things. And then the other thing that I need from a boss is that he needs to draw me an envelope and tell me to colour it in. If I've got a boss that's micromanaging me, it lasts about half an hour.
Right. So there's so then from this was Sky, and then you can tell it's Sky UK, Sky
UK.
Germany, and Fox, and then you can share some of the highlights there. But then, it's just interesting how you end up here in Malaysia, which is what I'm trying to get at. How did that journey happen?
So when I joined Sky, the partner, Gary, who was now running Sky supply chain, he worked for a guy called Richard Freudenstein, who was the COO at Sky in the UK at the time. And roll the clock forward 4 years, Gary leaves, they promote me to be Gary. Richard leaves and goes to Foxtel down in Australia. I then start working for a guy called Brian, who's another dear friend now. Brian and I were together in the UK for 5 years, and then Brian went to be CEO of Germany.
Right.
And we had that same kind of phone call, which is, what are you doing now? I'm kind of like, well, I've kind of run that's time in the UK has run its course. And Brian said, could you come and give me 9 months in Sky Germany? Well, 9 months turned into 5 years. Wow. Yeah, and I was COO for Brian a long time then. And then the company was sold. We did a turnaround, did a great numbers. But the kind of like the band, the team that did that were all disbanding sort of thing. And Brian went off to Fox in the US. Right. And I went away and just decided I'd have a bit of a break. And then I was traveling through LAX. I'd been in Portland, Oregon, hiking. And I was traveling through LAX, the 4-hour layover. And I rang Brian and said, I'm in LAX and I can come out the airport. Do you fancy a beer? 4 hours later, I got back on the plane with a job, which was for 6 weeks, right. Which became 6 months, which became how long can you stay? And then Richard Freudenstein had popped up again because Richard and I had kept in touch the whole time. And Richard knew AK. And Richard had been on the board here at Astro. And when AK was looking around for somebody to come and help, as they needed a CEO, COO, kind of somebody that had all the tech experience, Richard recommended AK. Right. Recommended me to AK. So I had a couple of conversations with a great guy who's still on our board, Simon Cathcart. He lives down in Australia. And then Simon put me on a plane and I went to Marylebone and I met AK for the first time in what I thought was going to be a 1 hour chat. And I had no clue who this man was at the time, because I'm spectacularly naive. I expected I was going for a 1 hour chat and we were 6 hours together.
Wow.
6 hours, yeah. When AK did a meeting, he really did a meeting.
Right,
yeah.
And what intrigued you to join?
AK's vision was one that was super important. Secondly, I knew that I could add some value because in terms of where the pay TV world has been transitioning to, some of the things that we've done. So broadly, I think you could say that the Comcast, the Skies, maybe 5 years ahead of what's happening in this region. Multi-choices in South Africa, Sky New Zealand, the Foxtels in Australia, they're maybe 2 to 3 years ahead. But you could see what was coming. So I felt like I had a good plan. And then they brought me to KL and I just loved the weather. And I think they sat me down in the Four Seasons and pushed Nasi Lemak into me. And I was like, this is a done deal.
You're a changed man. You're a convert.
done deal.
Okay, I want to talk a little bit about, a little later about Astro's, plans and with you on board, but a little bit about your leadership style. Maybe a challenge, right? I think in your years of working that significantly shaped your leadership style.
Wow. There's been a lot.
Okay.
There's been a lot. Let me tell you about I fail all the time. Yeah. You just have to get back up and start again. So it is, I am maybe 33, 34 years old. I am cocky. I think that I know the world. I've just arrived in Sky in the UK. We are rationalizing. We had this strange setup. I was in supply chain and we had one company running a warehouse, another company running the distribution for the engineers, another company running the pallets, another company doing parcels. And they were all competitors, Securicore and Excel and Hayes at the time. And it was adversarial and it was broken. And it took us 72 hours to get something from warehouse into an engineer's hand to go and install it in the field. So we decided that we would do this big RFP. And we did that. A company won. A company was called Hagemeyer at the time, still exists, but they're not in this business anymore, so I hope I can talk about them. And I got on really well with this UK team from Hagermeyer, and we built this plan and design, et cetera, et cetera. And then about 2 months, so I then went to all of these adversarial for suppliers and basically went, beep, beep, you, yeah, I'm out of here because you're just too hard to work with kind of thing. Went to Hagermeyer. We're 2 months away from launch, putting the whole system in. And the entire UK team gets sacked by the Dutch parent, yeah. And at that time, I should have swallowed my pride and swallowed my ego and gone back cap in hand to the various four and said, I'm in a bit of a mess because I no longer have anybody that's kind of like in my tent to do the thing we need to do. But I was too bravado and wanting to prove that I was. Yeah. So I didn't do that. Okay. I didn't do that. So we went and launched with nobody interested in that business, in looking after the Sky business. It was a shambles. And so I found myself in a room about 4 months in, and we'd had all sorts of problems getting stock to engineers. It was, we'd had engineers turning up at warehouses crying because they couldn't get set-top boxes, etc. And 4 months later, I find myself back in the theatre of fear, third floor, Sky, Athena. Richard Freudenstein is my COO, and I'm there with my 12-page deck explaining why, even though I've just burnt best part of £500,000, I now need another £500,000 to move again to another supplier that we found, a company called Unipart, who, by the way, Sky is still with today. Right. So that worked. But I'm there trembling and I'm expecting to get sacked, right? Because I've just blown £500,000 and it's been a terrible 4 months. We've really struggled to get stuff done. And so I'm on page 3 of 12 and everyone's like shaking around the table and I'm going to get sacked, I'm going to get sacked, I'm going to get sacked. And Richard was outstanding. Richard was on page 12 by the time I was on page 3. The meeting had gone on for about 8 minutes by now. And Richard basically went, so let me get this right. You've messed. He didn't say that. Yep. You've messed this up. Okay. You've messed this up. I said, yeah. And he said, but you've got a plan to fix it. I said, yeah. He said, all right, here's the rule. Once is unlucky, twice would be incompetent. Okay.
So don't screw it up.
So I left and we did it and it was fine. And I tell that story all the time because it's easy to be a manager and manage somebody when everything's going well and it's going fine. Yeah. It's those moments when he could have just screamed. And Richard was a tough guy, right? Yeah, he was a really tough guy. One year I saved 30 million sterling on the set-top box deal. And I wrote this 2-page email to him saying, look how good I am, sort of thing. I got a okay back. Not even a capital O, just okay. And it's like, whoa, I deserve even more than that. But he was brevity was his watchword. Right. But when it was real on it, the trust that he showed, he didn't get upset. He's just like, okay, we've created a learning experience here. Right. Yeah, and I think that's what I try and give my people, yeah? It's great when it's success and you've had all the fantastic stuff, but as long as somebody's going, and as long as people put their hand up and say, this is my mess and I'm going to clean it up. Right. As the boss, you just go, okay, what do you need? How can I help?
What was that line again? Once is
unlucky, twice is incompetence.
All right, okay. You talked about how you're intrigued with meeting with AK and seeing his vision, right? So how has it evolved since you've become Group CEO? And a little bit about that vision for Astro.
So pay TV, global, transformation, turmoil, chaos, call it what you will. If you look at pay TV, it's extremely heavy fixed cost. Set-top boxes, satellites, contact centers, engineers in the field. But it's a fixed cost. So it's almost whether you have one customer or 10 million customers, the amount of money you're paying is largely the same. Right. So in the good days, we were in Sky Germany, we worked out that once we got to 3.2 million, we were at 2.5 million customers, we worked out that once we got to 3.2 million customers, it's kind of like cost covered. From there on, we're in fields of clover. And when we sold, we were at near 5. So in the good days, it was great. Now the world's changed. So now we're in this IP, OTT, and we're not playing in country anymore. We're playing with people that can build content and make it global.
Right.
And so for a local player, scooping out the cost of the legacy machine, getting all that cost off, at the same time as bridging ourselves into the new world so that we've got an IP structure and a framework, and creating other lines of revenue that will augment that as the cost comes down for consumers, is a really difficult journey for any company to go on. And, everyone's on the journey. Comcast, Rogers in Canada. I talk to all these guys, they're all on exactly the same journey that we're on. Right. The true digital guys up in Thailand, the guys, MTech and guys in Indonesia. We're all on this same journey. And it's about how do you drive down the cost and get the cost base down, still make the content thing that differentiates you. That's the thing that we do best than anybody else. But then be able to take the cost that you've done and put it back to the customer as increased value. Right. That is the curve that we are on. And, we've launched Sukkah, we've launched addressable advertising, we've launched Astro Fibre. These are the things, together with studios, etc., that will generate and make the revenues for the future. Right. So it's really interesting for me to go from a transformation from a single rain fade repeats channels business to go to this business that has 5 or 6 different revenue. But I won't kid you, it's tough. Yep. It's tough. Transforming and pivoting a business is not an easy thing to do. I mean, I'm super lucky. I've got a great bunch of people around me that kind of get it and they are prepared to roll up their sleeves. And it's so exciting because we're doing so much. If I look at, compared to pay TV I've been in before, here, I've got a radio brand which has 80% of all the ears of Malaysia. 11 brands, 13 if you include the splinters. It's just fantastic. I'm learning radio on site, which is great. We make over 74%, I think we're at the moment, of the local box office movies. Right. And it's kind of like I say it a lot to the team. Astro's really such a part of the fabric of society here that it's a privilege. But without Astro, a lot of what Malaysians take for granted simply wouldn't be. Example for you, the local box office wouldn't exist were it not for us doing that movie. So how are the cinema chains and things surviving without us? Most of the viewing Media Prima makes some great stuff, RTM too, but most of their viewing is because we have a distribution platform to get to them the eyeballs that they need. So there's so much here. So it's kind of like a privilege and a duty that we feel to be, because we're so embedded compared to most other places, most other pay TV places that I've worked. You go to the UK, even though Sky's an incredibly good company and dominates the landscape now, people still, it's BBC, right? BBC's the main thing,
Right, okay. So, of all the things that you're talking about, the what's happening around the world, what excites you the most, though, if you were to...
Are we talking about Astro now?
Yes, still Astro.
Okay, we're still Astro.
Still Astro.
So I get excited by the way that we're driving our content slate the most. So the top 3 most watched dramas this year are all Astro. That's a first for decades.
Last year.
Decades. Okay, this year, year to date, the most watched top three dramas. So when you look at that and you look at how we're building other, say Tapak Takraw, which we've built from nothing, the Malaysian Football League, which we're growing engagement in ground, we're growing engagement on screen, etc. We're really helping build it. Those things, building content that resonates with the whole country, is super interesting to me. The next thing that we need to do is, if you ask anybody in this business, hopefully they'll tell you that Euan only wants to spend money on 3 things: content, product, and marketing. Okay. So the next thing that we have to do is make all the back end even more efficient. We're on a journey to do that, and we've already done some really good stuff, but we're on a journey to basically get all of the back end costs as low as we possibly can so that we can just focus on those 3 things. And that means the next step for us is, because we've done the usual efficiency thing and some automation machine, but the next thing is AI.
Right.
So when I play around with things like VO2, which is the new Google AI video creator, when I play around with some of the other tools that are out there, you can see so much opportunity and possibility to be able to do things quicker, faster, better, more, using those tools than we do today, whether that's in the content space or the marketing space.
Is this the scariest? I mean, like we've seen, and being in the industry for a long time, right?
Yeah.
This seems like, I mean, scariest or the most exciting, but do you think we're just like,
I think this is the scariest thing for a pay TV operator since Netflix.
Right.
Because Netflix went from who are these jokers that are just, giving us a bit of extra money to, oh my God, Orange is the New Black and House of Cards. And suddenly, whoa, these people have a business model that, their cost to operate's like a fraction of ours. So I think it's scary from that point of view, but we've kind of ridden that wave sort of thing now. And now the OTT that we're doing and the content that we're making, content that we make goes up on our platform. It gets the top 10s on our platform sort of thing. And then we've sold some of it off to, so Project High Council and things like that. We've sold it off to Netflix. Guess what? It gets on the Netflix top 10s as well. Right. It's really strong, really good content. Right. So the storytelling element, I think, will always be human. And if you don't eat your own lunch, if you're not prepared to cannibalize, someone's going to do that for you. Back in the early days of Sukkah, I heard it's going to cannibalize, it's going to cannibalize, it's going to cannibalize. And the answer is, well, either we can do it to ourselves, and then we can try and drive new markets and drive new eyeballs that, for whatever reason, don't engage with Astro. Either we can try and do that for ourselves, or someone's going to come and do it for us. Which would you prefer? And I think that's the same with the whole AI thing, is either we embrace AI or we're going to become irrelevant. So we better get after it. Right.
You've worked with different companies all around the world, from Greenland to Australia. What's it like? Do you think culture makes a difference, or something still are the same, human nature, in terms in the way you lead?
Everything's different and everything's the same.
Okay.
Super lucky. This is 9th country I've worked in. Yeah. I remember saying I wanted to work abroad, and that was maybe...
Inclusive of Greenland?
10, including Greenland. Including Greenland, it's 9 countries. Yeah.
Right.
I'm not sure that you could call prawn trawler emptying a career, but there you go. I think having been in many pay TV markets, everybody tells you how special and unique their particular market is, and it won't work here, and rubbish. It's the same absolutely everywhere. Yeah, there are the occasional twists with vernacular languages and those kinds of things, but fundamentally, people want to watch great content, and I don't think the consumer is very different wherever it happens to be. The amount of money they have in their pocket differs for sure, and their priorities sometimes different in terms of their spend. But fundamentally, if you're making great content, sports or local content, or you're bringing great content, the best of the content from overseas, people watch it wherever you are. And in terms of my leadership style, I don't think I could be anybody other than who I am.
Right.
Because, what's the famous saying? Everyone else is taken, so you might as well be yourself.
Right.
Yeah. For me to try and change my leadership style and approach. So, there's people that have come with me, that have been with me in Germany and been with me in Australia. My CTO has been with, poor guy. I think it's Stockholm Syndrome. He's been with me since 2010 now, I've dragged him with me around the world. But he'll tell you that the stories that I tell, because I always, when I'm building a team, I try to the team has to have a language.
Okay.
So that they can kind of like empathize. It's how we grow as a society and grow as humans, is stories. Yeah. So the team needs to get a bunch of stories and a language together. Well, the stories that I tell in Astro, whether it's the 70-second monkey, or it's Dave, or it's the 100 monkeys, or it's any of these things, it's the kick, or those stories are the same stories that I was telling in Unilever. And then when I've got some more, when I was telling when I was in Sky Germany, because they're universal. You're making universal points about anybody. The Dave story is about a guy who drives a truck for Jordan, the racing company. Story short, his actions win the race.
Right.
Yeah, but he's a truck driver. So you go, well, how can that possibly be? The point of the story is, it doesn't matter where you are in this organization, yeah, you can be the guy that puts the gold medal around the driver's neck. Yeah. And so then that's a universal story. Yeah, that story works in Malaysia, and it works in Australia, and it works in Germany, and it works in France, and it works in Denmark.
Right. Now, okay, you sit on several boards, right? One of which is Equinox Kombucha UK.
Yay.
Yeah, what interests you about this company?
Vote, go and buy kombucha right now. Go buy it. Go buy it. Oh, this is amazing. So this is kind of like in part. This is my give back.
Okay.
So I was dragged up in a pretty depressed part of Yorkshire for quite a lot of time, Huddersfield and Halifax.
It is the UK.
It is the UK, and it's Yorkshire, right? So this is a deep valley full of mills. Yeah, there's quite a lot of drugs there. There's quite a lot of unemployment. Yeah, and in the middle of it is a kombucha factory.
Right.
So the story short is. Story short. Let me try and get the short version. Guy called Dan goes to find himself in Brazil doing all the plant medicine stuff in 2016. Meets two people, Joanna and Andrew, who are cooking kombucha. They're hippies and they're cooking kombucha in their home, which is in a place called Mythenroyd in Yorkshire. He goes back, realizes, because he's looking at kombucha in Whole Foods in the US and he's looked at it in Australia, and he's like, why is there no kombucha in the UK? So he takes a lot of the money that he made from Barclays investment, and puts it in. Roll the clock forward 2 years, and he's won the Waitrose account, the supermarket.
Yep.
So he's won the Waitrose account. So now we have a proper business on our hands. So a couple of people come in to invest, and those people demand that there's more professionalism and there's more policies and procedures and things, and they want quality awards and they want sustainability. So Dan suddenly is looking at, I better stop this being a kitchen business and I better man up. So his best friend is a lady called Genevieve, my wife. So he asks Jen who she knows, and Jen has a background in sustainability. So Jen joins the company.
Right.
So at that point in time when she joined, I invested into the company, the first investment. Roll the clock forward now. Business is growing like crazy. We've just won Sainsbury's.
Wow.
Yeah. We did about 2.5 million of revenue last 2 years ago. We did three-ish this year. We're set to do 5 in the coming next year. We employ 40 people in this factory. It's a cracking little operation. The product it's a third of the sugar of pop or soda, and yet it's so good for you. And it's got a great taste. We're not all the best taste in the market. Yeah, we're number 2 in the market at the moment by sales volume. Yeah, and the beautiful thing about Equinox is that from where I used to live on a hill in Yorkshire, if I just took the handbrake off of my car, 500 meters later, I would hit the factory, down the hill and hit the factory. Right. So it feels like it's kind of like give back.
Right.
And it was in 2022 when we did the last raise, and I was putting money in all the time. I got over the threshold, got over the 10%, and so they put me on the board.
Right. Okay. So a far cry from the Astro activities.
Massive far cry. It's a far cry. Yeah.
What keeps you grounded? What do you do on a daily basis?
On a daily basis.
What is it? Like a routine.
So I will always try and do some kind of exercise every single day. So I have an amazing PT that comes and hurts me twice a week. Okay. I run. So I run twice a week. I've been doing half marathons the course of the last year. And I go to hot yoga every Sunday morning whenever I can. Yeah, it depends where I am in the world, because not everywhere has a hot yoga studio. Right. But there's a fabulous place down in Bangsar that I go to. Those things are all to get me into the present and out of my head. Right. Because there's so much churn goes on in, not just Euan's head, but everyone's head. There's so much churn goes on. I find meditation, I'm terrible at, hopeless at meditation. I've tried it a number of times. I find the best thing for me is get exercise, get your heart rate above 150, get sweaty, and the problems they just disappear for a while, which is great. So that's what I That's what I try to do.
Totally agree with you. A book or a movie that you've watched or that's resonated with you?
Thing that I watched most recently, I rewatched the entirety of The Trip.
Okay.
The trip, and then the trip to Italy, and the trip to Spain, and the trip to Greece, because it's both. I find it both profound and incredibly funny. It's Steve Coogan and Rob Brydon.
Yes.
The last book I read there's a couple of books that I've read. When I'm not doing this, I'm rewilding a patch of land by me in the UK, and there's a book called Feral by a guy called George Monbiot, who just describes the process and why we need to do this so beautifully well. I am a massive Tim Ferriss fan, so I will devour pretty much anything that Tim does. I try to do the Andrew Huberman and people like that, but Tim's been doing it for so long. I read his 4-Hour Work Week in 2010, I think.
Right.
And I've read it. I've just everything he has to say, I think, is fantastic. Him and his not sidekick, but the guy he has regularly on called Kevin Rose.
Right.
I think they're both absolute rock stars. And the other thing that I would say, which I've started gifting a lot, is a little bit more spiritual, is Illusions by Richard Bach, which is the book he wrote after Jonathan Livingston Seagull. I go back to that all the time. I've probably read that book 100 times.
Right.
I just find that there's a story about beings clinging to rocks, and there's a story about this guy that he doesn't want to be the Messiah, but they're making the Messiah. I think that there's so much profound wisdom in that book. Yeah?
Right.
It's
And you see something new in it every time.
every single time. Every single time. They have in the book, they have these kind of like little epithets and stuff.
Right.
It's a bit like a fortune cookie thing, yeah? But it's like, and then every single one that he opens, each time I open, there's something new there, because there's probably about 40 or 50 different ones of them. So I always go back to that. Yeah, that
Final
book's
question,
amazing.
Euan. What legacy do you hope to leave behind at Astro and in the industry?
We're going to make sure that, let's change the language. We're going to make sure that Astro is a thriving business and continues to be the fabric of Malaysia. But I want to go bigger than that. Before I arrived in country, I've been in the business 20 odd years. Nobody had ever said Malaysia is a place to make great content.
Right.
And having got here, the creativity and the innovation is as good as anywhere. Yeah, I would hold One Cent Thief, and I'd hold things like Kaha and Sheriff, both in storytelling and in production quality. They're as good as anything. Yeah, and that you can see that because we put them on Netflix. They do incredibly well. So it's not good enough, I think, that Astro just looks after Malaysia. I'd like Astro to be the flag carrier, to take Malaysian content I'd like us to become the next Korea.
Right.
Now, that requires an absolutely huge effort. Everyone nods politely when you're in the room. All the regulatory and the governmental bodies, they nod politely when you're in the room. But if you want to be Korea, you have to have a plan.
Yeah.
And you have to have kind of like a decade's worth of investment and just going at it and giving all the grants and making sure that things happen and having milestones like Parasite and Squid Game for Korea. You have to develop that overall plan. But if I could put the Malaysian content industry on the road to becoming the next Korea, that'll be immense.
Right.
I'd
And back
love
to your
that.
point earlier on content, product, and marketing.
Absolutely.
We need to get good at that. Thanks. So I've really enjoyed the conversation and learning from you.
Lovely to talk to you.
Of course.
Well, to talk at you, sorry.
Of course, you've been watching Live Confessions Season 3.